Welcome to another episode of Wednesday Forever, the comics that inspired a generation. I'm your host, Michael Dolce, as always, joined by my co-host extraordinary, Mr. Victor Dandridge. Today, we welcome a comic book great, Mr. Tim Seeley. How you doing, sir?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. Good to see you guys.
And the comic book of choice is Hack/1, one of the longest-running horror titles at Image Comics, one of the most best-selling and well-known horror books. Indie books in general. We thought this is a great issue to kind of take a look at and to be able to talk to the man who created it himself. So Tim,
now that I think I'm asking about it. Are we doing Euthanize, the very first one, or the Image issue #1, or the?
We'll do the Image. We're going to do the Image issue 1 because, well, actually,
no. Let's go back to the very beginning, man.
Going back to the very beginning. There we
go.
More
stories about Euthanize. That's the very first one.
Yeah. Let's go back to the very, very beginning because I'm gonna start off with the question of, to put yourself in the position of writer-artist, was this a long-time dream where, Hack/, was a series that had germinated in your head like the Sire for Mike for years, or was this like a spark suddenly and you ran with it and it just kind of grew from there?
So, I had been drawing at Devil's Due. I've been doing G.I. Joe and some Dungeons & Dragons stuff. And but I knew I didn't know I could write, I guess, in a weird way. Like, I didn't know I was a writer, so I was a comic book artist. But I had done this book for fun called Love Bunny and Mr. Hell, which I loved doing, but was too weird and sort of, it was just like, it never stuck, I think. And we also launched it at a time where, a debut Image comic would come out at 5,000 if you were lucky. So, but I had so much fun doing that. I wrote and drew that book that I knew I wanted to do something, but I was so busy with drawing full time. Like, I was one of the few people on earth with a comic book staff job. So I would go into Devil's Due at 9 in the morning and I would leave at 6:30. And I had a staff job drawing a comic. But the restrictions were really tight on G.I. Joe, obviously. And they were getting tighter by the day. When we first started G.I. Joe, Hasbro was kind of like, yeah, no one cares about G.I. Joe. Do whatever you want. And then as things went on, they got a movie deal with Spielberg production company for Transformers. Obviously, we know what happened with that. And they were starting to be like, oh, maybe people will have eyes on this. So we started getting more restrictions.
People will care.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then I remember one point we got, they sent along a letter that had been from an Arkansas school board because there was a G.I. Joe kids book which had scarlet head boobs. And someone wrote an angry letter. She just had them under her shirt. And someone wrote them an angry letter, that's as far much too much rendering by this artist about them boobs or whatever. So I was like, so we just started getting these lists of things you couldn't put in G.I. Joe, which was no one can point a gun at anyone's head. No one can, show any sort of cleavage, no butt shots, no shots of women from behind in any way. And obviously I get it. It's G.I. Joe. It's essentially a kid's property. But I was working on this stuff and I started being like, oh man, this is such a bummer. And I started getting really frustrated. So originally I conceived of I'm going to do a book that has all the things that are on this list. And so I started thinking about what that would be. And then the idea for Hack/ kind of kicked around, initially inspired. I mean, we could talk about sort of where that comes from, but initially it's sort of inspired by, I'd grown up with a dad who loves B movies. So all through my childhood, I would see all these B movies I probably should have been seeing at age 8, 9, and 10. But, and so I had this really deep knowledge of sort of B movie stuff. So I knew I wanted to do a comic book about that. And I originally was going to draw it and I was going to have Robert Kirkman write it.
Wow.
So I pitched it to him, and then he got, right around then is when he got picked up to do some stuff at Marvel. He was doing at the time Invincible and Walking Dead, and some Master of the Universe comics. And then we were going to have him do G.I. Joe. We were going to have him do a Snake Eyes miniseries at Devil's Due. And then he got picked up to do some Marvel stuff, and he was too busy, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to write it myself. And I didn't know how to do that, really. I didn't know how to write a 44-page book, but I was like, I'll figure it out. And so I made up Hack/, and I called an artist I had worked with on Micronauts, Stefano Caselli, and he and I got along really great. We obviously never met in person, but we had kept in touch via the phone.
His work is fantastic too.
Yeah, and he's an awesome artist. And I asked him, hey man, how do you feel about horror? And he said, I'm Italian. Of course I love horror.
Hello.
So he and I teamed up on it. I gave him 50% of the rights. He still has 50% of the rights. And so, I got him to do the book for a song, and then we managed to put it out. It was just like one of those things you do when you're a kid. You don't think there's anything to stop you.
Nice. That is fantastic. Obviously it's going to be a question for later for us to answer, but the fact that most people today really only know you as a writer is insane to think of how you came into the industry. But we will get into that in a little bit.
Let's get into it. Go ahead.
Right now? Okay. Well,
we have no format here.
I mean, you're right. I was just saying. I mean, is that something that you miss, full-time penciling?
Yeah, sometimes, if only because penciling it's so much more zen, I guess. Like you can just zone out and do it. You don't have to think a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas writing is completely like absorbing. It's easier, people always tell you, oh, it takes less time. It's so much easier than drawing. Yes, true. But also, like, you can kind of just go somewhere else and just do the job. And you can do it while watching, listening to music. You can do it while the movie plays in the background. None of those things are true about writing.
Right.
But it's also less physically devastating. Drawing, hunching over is very difficult. Your hand gets beat up.
Mangled.
I had what do you call it? Like I had arthritis in my hand from.
Oh, wow.
From drawing at Devil's Zoo. We were drawing like 12 hours a day sometimes and stuff. So, that you don't have to worry about that with writing. So I do miss it. I really need to get back. I'm 43. I need to do something that I write and draw at some point here. It's been...
Your Wikipedia page is off then, because they got you at 45. They think you look old. They think you're older than you are.
I sent them a thing like, this is not correct. I don't really know how to edit a Wikipedia page, and I don't want to. So
every time you do it, somebody's just going to put it back. They're just going to make you older. Every time you make it younger, they're just, oh, he's 67. You're like, wait, what?
I'm rapidly aging like a... Yeah.
No,
but, so I definitely think about it. But, I mean, I think, we don't live... It's not an industry that hires people to write and draw, really.
Right.
Very few people have done that. When they do it, it's usually like a big deal. But I can't go to DC or Marvel and be like, "Hey, I want to write and draw something." And generally speaking, they're going to tell me no because it lessens their control. As far as they're concerned, it takes too much time.
Yeah.
And they would rather be like, "Well, you're an okay artist, but what if we got a much better artist than you?" And I understand, or somebody cheaper, like somebody in Brazil or somebody, in Turkey or something. And so it's hard to get that to line up.
So take me back. You said your dad was a big B-movie fan. What was and so it was this kind of just to kind of piggyback off what Victor said. It's kind of something that was brewing subconsciously, I guess, since you were a kid. Then hack slash.
Yeah, to some degree, I think. And I was really liked slash movies in that I was really afraid of them as a teenager. Like by the time I started hack slash, slash movies don't scare me, but they really affected me as a kid. Like the idea of obviously it's meant to be very, this shapeless human face and, or whatever that kind of, alien, Michael Myers is kind of just like, all humanity has been reduced from him. And that scared the shit out of me as a kid. Now, less so because reality is much scarier, but so I was really into that stuff. But I also really loved like schlocky vampire movies and schlocky science fiction movies because my dad, he was one of the first people to get a VCR in my town. He saved up. I remember my dad worked at a factory. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, so we didn't have a lot of money. But my dad saved up to go get a VCR, and the day we got it, it was like a big holiday. I remember it was like 1982, and he went and bought this one at Kmart, and then we went immediately across the street to the new video store, Pot of Gold Video, and my dad was just like, oh, this is what he wanted. He got like all these like Roger Corman movies and stuff.
Nice.
Like my dad has still never seen Citizen Kane. We talk about this, but like he loves boobs and violence and monsters, and he has always been that way. And he's a pretty young dad. When I was 5 years old, my dad was probably only 24.
Oh wow, okay, yeah.
So he's a young guy. But yeah, so it was just always around. That this sort of stuff. And there's something I learned about it. I had a full-time job doing G.I. Joe. It was like, you should write something you don't have to research.
Yeah.
Because, like if I got to spend months researching something, that's a bunch of time.
It's going to take forever.
It's going to take forever. I didn't have to research slash movies. I have already seen them all. And I know, that sort of schlag stuff, but I also wanted to do, and this is sort of a thing I've wanted to do my entire career, is elevate things that people look down at.
Mm-hmm.
So, with whether that's slasher movies or
Nightwing.
Or
Whole night. I got you.
Actually. And, porn, things that people consider low culture, I just think that's bullshit that we separate, things by their content. So, one of the initial ideas in Hack Slash was, could you care about people in a slash movie? Because generally that's not the point.
Right.
But what if you could? And what if someone treated it that way? So that was kind of the initial impetus and my interest in it,
What other influences did you have? I mean, it's weird, right? Anytime you have a female protagonist like Buffy, like everyone's like, oh, it's Buffy, it was. Did you have other influences from having a female protagonist?
I had never seen Buffy when we started Hack Slash because when I grew up in a small town. We didn't have cable, so I didn't have that. And then I went to college and I was broke, so I didn't have cable. And then I got out of college and I was broke and I didn't have cable. So I had never seen the Buffy TV show. I had seen the movie.
I hope you're doing better now.
Yeah. Like, I really, you got some things you might want to sell in the background, get you some cable access.
I penciled G.I. Joe, I was broke. Yeah. I wrote Nightwing, I was broke.
No, just, I've come from, blue collar, non-college educated family stock, so we never were super well off or anything. But it wasn't Buffy wasn't an influence at all. Later, people were like, "Oh, that's very Buffy," and I was like, "Oh, I can kind of see." I think Joss Whedon and I came from the same spot, which he was like, "What if the cheerleader fought back?" That was his pitch. Obviously, mine is very similar. But I didn't. It definitely was.
That's one of those things, right? Like those, you can have an independent idea that is, independently two different people having almost similar or same ideas.
And his I think now I've seen some Buffy and I've seen other Joss Whedon things, and he has a different aesthetic than I do. I think his is more cute and sort of whatever sort of I guess the word is twee, I guess, and I'm not, and so we have a different sort of approach to things. But he's a very good writer, and I think Buffy has obviously resonated for a long time.
I actually think that Hack Slash would be the perfect endpoint of the spectrum for the trajectories of Buffy and Hack Slash to kind of cross, where Buffy, started off in a more visual television style format and then became a comic book, and then Hack Slash starts off as a comic book and then ends as a TV show or series, because I think even now we're more adjusted to visually seeing something like that on Netflix or Shudder or anything like that. So I'm going to put that out there in the universe. Somebody get you a TV deal, because I think that would be amazing.
Multiple TV deals, they always fall.
Well, long form.
Yeah. Victor, it's funny you mentioned that too, because, and that's kind of not a gripe that I've talked about on my podcast before, but context matters, right? I think the generation that grew up now has had these strong female protagonists, where it's almost it's not it was a novelty, even going back to 2004. I mean, that's a novelty to have something like that. It was not something that you would normally see, or normally see in such an accepted way. Now it's in the generation coming up, they're almost used to it now. I mean, every new show is a female protagonist now, right? I mean, Warrior Nun, which just debuted and did fantastic on Netflix. I mean, that's another. Now it's a bunch of female protagonists. So it's just interesting. It's interesting to see, kind of being, Tim, in your case, being able to kind of say you did it first, Well,
I mean, a big part of it was, so when I first moved to Chicago, I'd come from Wisconsin and then Minnesota, and, I landed in Chicago and they had goth clubs and people you could go to a bar and they were playing Sisters of Mercy. And I was like, this place is fucking amazing. So I was going to those places. So I knew, the girls I was dating and the people I knew were all punk, fashions and goth people and shit like that. And then we would go to conventions, and I would always, when I first started Devil's Due, we would do a convention every weekend pretty much. I mean, except for January and February, we were pretty much all summer we were going to conventions, and all fall and spring. And then, so, inevitably I would see all these goth girls and punk girls coming to shows. And I was like, nobody's making a comic book for them.
Yeah.
So part of that with Hack Slash 2 was, one, I was living the life, and surrounded by those people, but also that I just, going to convention was there's all these kick-ass girls, and what are they going to read? What, they were definitely finding Sandman, and they were definitely finding stuff. It's like, Marvel wasn't making anything for them, and DC was barely making anything for them. So besides the Vertigo stuff, that was part of my impulse too. Like, I know they're there, I've seen them, and so that was a big inspiration too.
Dude, I gotta admit, like, I've always been a fan of your writing, and hearing you talk about it, like, solidifies that even deeper, because you're a very thoughtful creator, where it's not just a matter of what you're creating on the page, but looking beyond that. How did that go into the pitch for getting Hack Slash, picked up?
Oh man, well, so it was weird because I worked on staff at Devil's Due, so I was drawing stuff, and my boss Josh Blaylock, also a friend of mine, was like, yeah, we should definitely do some more original stuff, but he didn't know how to approach it, especially because our other stuff was licensed,
Yeah.
So I told him I have this idea for this thing. I'm gonna get Kirkman to write it. And he was like, okay, all right. But he wasn't like 100% sold yet. And then he came up with the idea to do this sort of fantasy thing called Warstone. We're gonna do these 2 one-shots. And so when I pitched him with the art, I was like, it'll be 44 pages, and if it doesn't work, you're out, right? Like, we do one shot, and if people don't like it, don't worry about it. So I think like there wasn't a lot of commitment that Devil's Due had to put into it. And Josh always liked the character. Like, he was always a big supporter. He was like, that character looks great. So I think for him was always sort of a visual side. He's not a horror guy. He never has been. So he didn't really get that, but he knew I did. So that was kind of, I think if I'd have pitched it at the time anywhere else, it wouldn't have come out. So, I always have been appreciative to Devil's Due for being supportive of the idea from the beginning, even if it wasn't Josh's thing. And I think, Hack Slash was one of those books, once it came out and once it was successful for a while, it took people a long time to be like, yeah, we get it now. Like, if I'd gone straight to Image, I don't know if it worked, but once Devil's Due closed up, I come to them and I'm like, hey, I have 4 trades worth of stuff. You want it? And they're like, yeah, bring that shit here. So it's one of those things that it had to prove itself. No one was going to give it a chance really, besides Josh, and that's because I worked there.
Nice. So just to recap for some of our listeners too, as well, like Hack Slash is the story of Cassie Cassandra Hack, and she's basically the prototypical, you would call, the victim of a slasher movie,
the final girl, yeah. Over, yeah.
But she manages to kind of flip the switch and become empowered by that. And she goes out hunting slashers with her partner in crime, Vlad. Take us through the character breakdowns too. I mean, we've talked a lot about Cassie. Vlad is a fan favorite, and Vlad is somebody who, I think there's a really great dynamic between the two of them. But take us to the very beginning. Like, what were your plans for these 2 characters, and what were you basing them off of in your head?
So, oh man, so I'm trying to like think exactly how it comes together. But basically, I knew I wanted to do a book about the final girl. I knew she had to have someone to talk to, but I hadn't kind of worked that out yet. But I came up with Cassie first, and she was named after a girl I know I'd met at a convention, who I had a big crush on, and she's well aware of it. She's actually a cover model on a bunch of issues, so no surprise there. But so I used her name, and then I designed her. I'd gone to see a production of Rocky Horror Picture Show, and there was this actress in it. She was also in this local band, and she had dark hair and blue eyes, and she just like looked so cool. Her haircut stuff. So I sketched Cassie around that character, around that girl. And then I didn't have a last name for her, but I had a title for the comic. I knew it was going to be called Hack Slash. So I had that idea.
That's one of those magic things that just kind of falls into place, right? You're like, yeah, I want to call this actually. Oh,
well, I didn't have that idea, so I was talking to Marshall Dillon, who was the publisher at Devil's Due. I told him I had this idea. I was like, it's got this girl named Cassie, and the book's called Hack Slash. He goes, well, her name's Hack, right? I was like, yes.
Yes, it is. It is now.
Yeah. Do you know what's funny? They actually say it's easier, and as a writer, personally, I know this. It's easier to come up with a title and then work your way around the title.
Oh, agreed.
Than it is to come up with a concept and then try to find a title that matches it.
Yeah. Absolutely true, man. Well, and I usually have, there's some kind of concurrent thing where it's like, I kind of have a title and I kind of have an idea, and then one of them jumps ahead and that informs the other one, whichever way it goes.
Like Voltron.
Yeah, it's Voltron. They're all coming together towards forming the head.
I've done it the other way, and I had a Kickstarter book in 2014, and it was called The Undone. It was about a guy who could rewind time, but I couldn't come up with, and he uses it to go cash into the stock market, and I just could never, and I never liked the title. The title just never sat with. I'm retitling and going to put it out on Kickstarter again, down the line, because I was never happy with it. But meanwhile, you have something like my original book, like The Sire, and I was like, no, that's title. Boom. That's the name. That guy, what does he do? He gives people superpowers. He brings life. That's it. He's got it. There, you're done. It's weird how that. It's just weird, like how it's just. You come up with a title, it just makes everything just fall into place so much easier.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, and then I told Marshall, well, I need a sidekick. I need somebody for her to talk to, and he said, you had to call that guy Slash, and I was like, no. So I knew that was the thing. Some people still go, is that Hackin Tim Slash? But so Vlad, originally I sketched him out. He was going to be this big biker guy.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I didn't like it. It didn't stick in my head. I named him Vlad after my grandfather. My grandpa's name is Vladislav Legner. And so I named him after my grandpa. And then, and also there's a horror connotation to that name anyway, but it was mostly for my grandfather. And then, I was sketching around and I was watching Friday the 13th. And then I thought, what if Jason had turned out okay? Like, what if he had been treated terribly and yet the goodness in his heart had led him to be mostly a good person? So that's Vlad, the gentle monster, really. That's awesome. And so so he comes out of that weird idea, and the gas mask got and sort of the weird that he was going to have this accent because he was raised by an old Czechoslovakian guy, which is based partially on my grandfather. And then I just had to write this. I sent those to Stefano. I had 2 sketches, and then he turned them into that first cover. So I told him roughly. The original story, Euthanized, comes from when I started Devil's Due. My first job was to see what other licenses we could pitch for, because we had G.I. Joe, Micronauts, Voltron, and something else I can't remember. But we were trying to look for other stuff. So I said we got to go after Army of Darkness. This is before Dynamite had it. I was like, there's got to be an Ash comic. So I wrote an Ash comic, or basically an outline for it, and it was Ash versus the evil pet dead, basically. And so I still have the pitch piece somewhere, but that was the storyline. And then, obviously Dynamite ended up getting Evil Dead later. So I took that plot and I just turned it into a hack slash story. So when I sent it to Stefano, I just said, it's going to be, animal zombies, and here's these 2 characters, and it's going to be a guy, a sketch of, he's a veterinarian character. So I sent him that, and that's how we ended up with the first image.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so as a weird sort of evolutionary thought, what is something that's different from your initial take on either Vlad or Cassie from where they are right now? Like in terms of character development, concept at least.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, just about everything. I mean, once I started, the idea on Vlad originally, I don't know, he was kind of supposed to, the original pitch for him, I think he was more of he was more of a badass, I guess. And then when I was writing him, he was just like this sweet guy. I know something about, he could kick some ass and he had 2 big machetes, but he kind of just went down this path. And then the story kind of changed where I think the original idea was that she was sort of containing the monster, like he was the monster. And then it switched, and he's the one containing the monster. Right. So she's the one that's sort of always this close to going over. And that's a much better idea. I mean, Vlad kind of chose his own place in the story, which obviously, if you guys know, sometimes it happens when you're writing. The characters do it for you. That became the story, right? It's the story of a monster and the girl he works with, right? Or that kind of was always the thing that it became versus what my initial concept of it was. But it happened pretty quickly too. And I still don't have, when I write now, I wish I worked like I did when I wrote the first Hack Slash books. So they could just come out. I would just be writing, and I'd be like, oh, I'm on page 35. Holy shit. And now I'm like, it's like
page 2. Come on.
Now it's like Thursday, and I'm like, I got to be on fucking page 20, and I'm on page 9. God, what the fuck? And it's just so much harder now. And there was just tons of shit in me, and it was just, it was like there's a youthful arrogance I had, which I was just like, I can write this. Whatever. Who gives a fuck? I don't have a degree in writing or whatever, but I just was like, I'm gonna do it. I don't care. And I never doubted myself. I never, now I just, it's weird. I went the other direction. Now I'm like, is that good? I don't know. I never questioned it.
No. To be fair to you, like literally, if you look back at your career over the last 15 years, you've had such an astounding growth as a creative that I can definitely see you self-inflicting the pressure to maintain that awesome. So there's nothing wrong with that. It's just taking stock of the cool things that you've done so far and saying, okay, how do I keep going? So I'm all for that.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, part of it I think is just, you come into something with, like I had those ideas for this story brewing probably for 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I didn't make up Cassie when I was a kid, but the ideas and some of that stuff was all in there, and it was in there when I was, 16, mowing lawns for a job or working at Burger King. It was still going. All these things were brewing. And then, so they were just like, my head was just bursting with ideas.
Yeah.
And I poured them all out. And now I'm 43 and I have to like come up with shit because I used all those up, right? All that sort of stock that I had is long out in the world,
It's also probably, I mean, it's your, at least for me anyway, my experience is having a family and all this other stuff. Like your world gets a lot smaller quicker, because you're occupied, your kids are occupying you, or your family's occupying you, or, when you're 23, you could just, I mean, like, hey, you want to go to California? Think sure. And then all of a sudden you have like 6, like a week and a half of like just an adventure. And like you said, it kind of bottles up. So, I mean, I think, as you get more, we'll say more experienced, it gets a little tighter. The bubble closes a little bit. I want to get back to what you said real quick though, in terms of your process for these characters. As a penciler, everything you said is I sketched this out. I had a visual idea for this. Do you still feel that way, or are you handling things more like a writer than because it's funny, as a writer I would always want to. I mean, I drew, but I never drew my own stuff for the most part. And when I did, that's why I didn't get anywhere. I've actually found I'm drawing more just to kind of look at comics from a more visual standpoint, right? But for a long time, I would do it just as a writer. I would say, no, let me get in front of my computer and type. Yeah. What are you doing now versus what you did back then when you did /1?
I mean, it depends. And I definitely notice the books I don't sketch the character out, at least, or have some kind of visual sense, first always go worse for me. Yeah. So definitely drawing stuff I've come to learn is like I kind of have to have that hands-on. I don't really get characters until I've drawn them. It's I guess I must be visual first. I'm sort of about myself. So the stuff I'm developing, like most of the time, like Money Shot, I had to draw the characters out first. The piece for that, I did the pitch piece, I did the character designs. I gave them to an artist who is much awesomer than me, and she did her thing with it, and I'm glad she did. But at least from the beginning, I kind of have to have my hands on the design. So pretty much now, every time I start something, there's some amount of sketching from me. When I did the latest couple of Master Universe things I did at Mattel or DC also, I sketched out all those new characters. I have to, I have to kind of, and maybe that's probably because I grew up on toys and so something has to be a cool action figure before I understand it. And so, Freddie obviously did all the cool additions to that when we did Injustice and stuff, but I had to start somewhere. I had to do an initial design. And then same with Masters of the Multiverse. Like, Tom and Dan both went with those designs, but I had to get them out of my head first. I just couldn't. I can't see it unless I've drawn it, And sometimes they're not great fucking drawings, but they exist, And, they just, and it's I always come with a caveat like, hey man, you can do your thing with it, but just so you know, this is what I was thinking.
Do you even lay out your pages before you script them?
I don't. I did it once. I tried it with /Crow. I laid it out before I wrote it. I liked it, but it took too long.
Gotcha.
And I gave it to Jim Terry, and he just did it better anyway. So I was like, why? Why am I bothering with this? So I don't know. I mean, I know people that do that. Obviously, Alan Moore classically has laid out a lot of his stuff first, draws it first. Grant Morrison also.
I do.
Do you? Yeah. So I mean,
I did that on mainstream once because I couldn't wrap my head around, like, is this too boring? Is what's going to happen? And it was just a scene. It was just a scene where,
really?
you know, and then I kind of gave it to Tal Caldwell, who was my co-writer, and we kind of talked it out. But having that was really helpful. Like all of a sudden it became like a comic to me, and I you know, and then it helped the writing.
That's my 3-step process. First, I write it in prose as bullet points. Mm-hmm. Then I have to sketch it out as a layout so I can do the page breakdowns, and then I can script.
Yeah,
I'm
really curious. You know, it's funny. I mean, it's funny, Tim, you bring that up because I'm just so curious as to, you know, how many writers actually do this. Because I know Raven Gregory. I was just talking to him the other day, and you know, and he's like, "No, I never drew my own comics. I don't draw. I write. That's all I do." I'm like,
yeah.
"Wow."
I mean, there's a lot of questions about, you know, some of the most accessible comics is like Walt Simonson or Frank Miller, and they're doing both things. And some of the most inaccessible comics are like when a novelist or a screenwriter tries to do a comic, and it's just like
they don't understand that.
They don't understand it's a visual language. So you know, but other people. I mean, Tom King was a novelist, and he's great at the. So it certainly works, you know, for some people. But some of the most impenetrable comics I've ever read in my life was like, oh, here's some big screenwriter, and we gave him a comic. Like, this is a fucking disaster.
Well, that's the statement of Kevin Smith when he first did Daredevil. And the script that he turned in, and he didn't want to, you know, have any words cut out. And so Quesada drew it and was like, okay, this is what this looks like. He's like, this is horrible. It's like, this is what you did, you know, back it up, you know, back it up. So,
and definitely, and the people that learn, you know, quickly obviously come out of it pretty well. But I don't know. If I had more time, I guess maybe I would, but like, I've got a week to write a script. I got Monday, I have to break it down. I have to write it Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday I got to proof it and send it in. So, do I have time in any of those? You know, I mean,
God,
it's just never going to happen. So, if I had the extended amount of time to do something, I probably would. But it's just this industry is not built for that now. I mean, if it was maybe in the past, but not now.
So going back, when you were doing this, and obviously as an undercurrent, music was an inspiration. What was part of your playlist, your soundtrack for a hack slash when you started this series?
I can actually open it. I have it.
Are you serious? Oh my God, that's awesome.
But I did make one, you know, when I first started out. I mean, like I said, I was going to this club called Neo, like every Thursday and Friday. So let's see. So I set up these, this playlist. I have the hack slash one here somewhere. Here it is, the hack slash soundtrack. So initially it was all like stuff I was hearing at Neo and the Exit Club, but also then I started putting stuff on it from movies. So like a lot of the Italian soundtracks for like Cannibal Ferox and stuff like that I was putting on there. But yeah, let's see what's on here. There's Twisted Cane by Danzig, the song Fuck You Lucy by Atmosphere, KMFDM's Going to Hell. Let's see what else is on here. The Misfits, Halloween. Let's see what else is on there. A lot of John Carpenter. Let's see. My Bloody Valentine. And then lots of Sisters of Mercy. That was like a big early inspiration of that stuff. And then like a fair amount of hip-hop stuff just because that's kind of something I like anyway. So Atmosphere and Brother Ali and stuff like that. So it was, so I had like the soundtrack that I would play. This thing, I've had it for 15 guys.
Yeah, man, you should definitely like keep that on repeat. That's freaking
Patreon.
Awesome. Right.
Yeah.
Do some interviews with those guys.
Yeah, but that used to like get me in the mode of like what it was.
Yeah.
But you know, it was I also couldn't share it at that time. Now I could put it on Spotify. I could probably. I'm too lazy to actually do that, but
no, please,
you're
please,
too busy.
Come
you're
on,
too busy.
man. Come on.
Look, let's be honest here, right?
No. Next time you're on a potty break, just start adding. You know,
I think I started one. I used to use because I do a lot of my writing with music, but I can't do lyrics. So I used to make these synthwave things for Spotify like 5 years ago that I would use to write stuff, but I've since stopped updating them. But
man, gotta get that.
Issue ones are really hard, right? I think that's universal. Everyone, you know, pilot episodes are difficult. You know, I actually just talked to the guy who did Warrior Nun, the creator, for a Rogue Wave podcast, and he's like, yeah, pilots. I've written a ton of them, and most of them are unproduced for a reason. And he said, so did you find there was a level of difficulty in doing an issue 1? And is there a scene though in that issue that you think you nailed?
So I'm actually weird. Issue 1s are the easiest for me.
Really?
Yeah, because they're not
enthusiasm.
About. Well, and they're also like not about carrying the plot, right? Like they're about the introduction of the tone and the character, and those are two things I'm very comfortable with. Plot is something I'm less comfortable with, and that has always been true, and probably always will be true. So I can hit the ground running at issue 1 because I'm like, I want to tell you about this thing, and there's this person, and then at the end of issue 1, I always got to set up what's going the plot, and then that's harder for me. And then as it goes on, plot is always like sort of kind of coming up with events and all this sort of stuff is like that's hard for me. So the hardest issue for me to write is 3, guaranteed. If it's a 6-issue arc, 3 is always the hardest.
Wow. Okay.
That's true for me.
Wow. All right.
But in this one, it's a contained story. Because it's euthanized is like it was a one shot, which we were like, maybe this will work, maybe it won't, I don't know. But I think that the thing that works really well for it, because it's so bold and so stupid, is like I think it's like 2 pages in, 3 pages in, 4 pages, is that you just get the strange story of Cassie Hack's like an origin thing that just like a double-page spread, and it just like confidently tells you like here's her story, and it's insane. Obviously, her mom's a lunch lady, and kills kids by dipping their head in gravy. Like, you know what I mean? And it just comes in the middle like a weird Twilight Zone, thing, and it's done in this like third person thing. I never would have done this now. I'd be like, oh, you're not supposed to do that. Narration is bullshit, and you're not supposed to do like third person and all. I just did it, and it works. Like to this day, we still use that spread. And Stefano drew the shit out of it.
Awesome.
But it's just this really simple, like, get around, because I only had 44 pages or whatever, and I knew that, I had to get her origin. I had to tell people who she was. No one knew who she was.
Right.
I knew I couldn't spend the issue on the origin because it had to be like, it had to start in media res, right? It had to be like, here's an adventure of this character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's just this really confident, ridiculous origin thing. It breaks the fourth wall. It doesn't. It's so weird.
That's awesome.
And everybody who executed on it did such a good job. The letterer, did this one, and the artist. So it's something I wouldn't do now. I'd be too afraid to do it. But then I was just like, whatever.
We're doing it.
Yeah, we're doing it. And it goes for 3 pages, and then it goes back to the story. And I guess that's how it works. So
that's amazing.
So, last question. Overall, judge. You be your own judge. What would you rate Hack / Euthanize number 1? What would you rate it, and how would you review it if looking back at your eyes now?
I mean, as you just started, like, this is something I would never do.
Does it pass the Tim Seeley mustard still?
Yeah.
Which I don't even know what that phrase means, but apparently.
Like, looking back at it now, I did stuff I would never do now, which is like, I was totally fine with like referencing stuff that was an inside joke, or just doing stuff for my friends. Like the first page where you get to after the origin story, there's a sequence with these teenagers making out. There was a guy from Wizard named Todd Casey. He was a big horror fan.
I love Todd. Yeah, Todd. All right, man.
Yeah, he told me if I put him in a book, he would try to get it in Wizard. He's the character Todd, the first thing here.
That's awesome.
He went on to write Krampus.
Todd took my spot in research. I worked for Wizard for 4 years. So he became, when I got promoted to website editor, he was the guy they hired to be the new research assistant. So
there you go, man. Small world.
He's so funny, yeah.
That's Todd Casey. And just there's other weird little things I put in there. People will be like, yeah, I wouldn't do that now. I guess to me that's sort of I don't know, self-obsessed or something. Like, but it works. It's fine. No one knows. I mean, Todd knows, but but there's like little stuff like that in there that we just did, because I was like, I might never get a published comic again. I should go crazy. I should
go in. That's right, man.
If one of my friends wants to be in there, then we'll throw him in there.
Especially if you get to kill him. Like, that's awesome. Nothing says friendship like disemboweling you. That's
Right, and then we even did that even more so later because Kirkman and Steve Niles and Scotty and they're all in the book later.
That's hilarious.
But we just that's the kind of stuff I probably wouldn't do now. But yeah, I don't think it's great literature.
I think you should start. I think you should get back to doing
that back.
I just don't do it. It's weird. I'm just so by the book, I guess. But but overall, like I would say, it's a really solid first effort. It's full of enthusiasm. I can't believe we pulled it off. Like I look at what I know now, I can't believe I was like, yeah, 44 pages, fuck it, let's do it. Like I mean, I didn't really know. I didn't know plot structure. This is all intuition. I didn't know. I mean, I did know it, but I didn't know what the structure.
I mean, but that's stories, man. That's natural to us as humans.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It works. I follow it sort of, but it's just pure, unbridled enthusiasm for comics and horror. So I'll give it higher marks for that. So it's an 8 out of 10. I think it's pretty.
That's awesome.
All right, I like it.
Yeah,
I like it.
I co-sign that 100%.
Tim Seeley, thank you so much. This has been Wednesday Forever, the comics that help shape a generation. And this is Mike Dolce signing off, Victor Dandridge as well. And catch us next episode.
Thanks for